Let's hope you're right, I say. After a bit more walking around, we finally reach the teleporter room where Barry Thundercloud is still standing behind the button-filled metal cabinet which operates the teleporter device behind him. When he sees the teleporter guy, gives us a wave and then he greets Brainan. Hey there, Brainan, the teleporter guy says. Are you taking our new recruits on their first mission? More of a training session, actually, Brainan says. I want to show them the usual guard patrol route so they can handle themselves while they're on the mission with us, even if our group needs to split up. The last thing we'd want is for them to get into a fight with the Royal Guards by mistake. Oh, so you're not planning to get into any fights then, teleporter guy says. Yeah, Brainan says. Hopefully it will be a short, uneventful trip and we'll be back in time for dinner. But remember that if you do get into a fight, I won't be able to teleport you out of there properly until you're all safely away and you've calmed yourself down. The teleporter says, we don't want another one of those accidents just like that time with Desmond. Yes, Barry, we'll be careful, Brainan says. And don't forget to actually return to the designated teleportation area before calling me on the transceiver this time. The emergency teleportation feature puts too much strain on this device to be used just for the sake of convenience. Okay, I get it. Just make sure that you teleport us to the usual coordinates, right? I don't want us to run into any trouble while we're up there. Roger that, the teleporter guy says as he presses some buttons. Have a safe trip. We then get surrounded by bright white light and we begin to feel our bodies vibrating loudly as we are being teleported to the surface. When the teleportation process is complete, we find ourselves standing in the middle of an abandoned alley in what appears to be one of the poorer districts of the city. As I look up in the sky, I see that it is now reddish color and it's likely it won't be long until the sun will be settling. This area is very rarely patrolled, so we use it as our regular teleportation spot when we want to get to the surface. Brainan says, come with me, I'll show you how you can track down one of those green-eyed metal balls in a matter of minutes if you know how to look for them. What happened during the accident that your friend spoke of earlier, Kate says as we all move to follow Brainan. When he said Desmond, was he referring to same Desmond that now guards the door outside the quarantine zone? Yes, that was a Desmond he was referring to. Brainan says that poor bastard had it rough. He was caught in a nasty fight once. He asked better to teleport him out of there as soon as possible. It was technically against our safety precaution to do such a thing before the teleporter device is rather old and it has trouble properly locking onto someone's aura if their aura isn't calm enough. But the situation seemed very dire, so Barry took the risk. From what Desmond described to us, the sensation he got when he got teleported was as if his whole body was being torn to shreds. The moments after he got teleported into the tunnel, he started vomiting and he felt sick for days after that. Even after all this time, Desmond still hasn't gotten over it, and he tries to avoid using the teleporter as much as possible. That's why he personally requested to be made into a simple guard in our rebel base, so that he wouldn't need to teleport to the surface anymore unless there was an extreme emergency. Damn, I say, that sounds pretty bad. Did he at least fully recover, or is he still experiencing teleportation problems due to the failed teleportation? He did completely recover in a few days, thankfully, but we have never tried to do a teleportation like that again since that day. Its effects are just too unpredictable to be worth the risk. Anyway, do you guys see that flying metal ball up in the air? It was going to circle on the area for a while, then it should come down to do a quick patrol of that alley over there. That's where we'll have a talk. That's where we have our talk. As long as we get there without being noticed, we shouldn't have much trouble. Let's go. We managed to make our way into the alley, since Brainan mentioned pretty easily, thanks to the general lack of guards in this area, and then we wait patiently for the drone to come down to us. After about 2 minutes of circling in the sky, the metal ball comes down just like Brainan predicted. It begins to hover a few feet above the ground, very close to us. Hey you, Brainan says, metal ball, I want to speak to the overseer. Do you hear me? The metal ball turns around so that its green eye can face Brainan directly. After a few seconds of silence, the drone responds in a usual metallic voice. Request acknowledged. The metal ball says, please stand by. The overseer protocol will be initiated shortly. Mindy, you're not sensing any of the royal guards nearby, right? Let's hope that we'll have more luck getting useful information out of it than Aiden. Brainan, remember that we will have the questions to ask too, so don't take too long. We'll go for the royal guards. I don't want to get caught in a fight. None of the ones we have met so far, at least. When it says I haven't met the others, so I couldn't say for sure that there are no royal guards around. But I'm not sensing any powerful mages nearby, so I think we should be in the clear. Overseer protocol now initiated. The metal ball says. Then the tone of the metallic ball suddenly becomes more expressive. Hello, Brain, and how may I assist you of today? May be of assistance to you today. You know why we are here. You old rust bucket. You're the one who invited us. Now tell us, why did why you did it. Overseer Protocol does not recall making such a invitation. The overseer says, perhaps you're confused. If you're willing to tell me which event you were invited to, I would be more than happy to lead you to the correct occasion. Looks like he's playing dumb again, Melinda says. Or maybe he's telling us that we are not the ones he invited here, and that he's only willing to speak to the official representatives of the King of the Underground, Kate says. That's not what he's saying, Kate. Brandon tells us, don't worry, he'll give us the info we need eventually. I just need to find the right question. Overseers, have there been any security changes in the palace security lately? Perhaps the kind of changes that could allow a group of rebels to sneak in unnoticed. There have been no such changes made recently, the overseer says. The palace is as secure as it always has been. Well, maybe the situation inside the castle has changed then, Brandon says. Is the King of Olander showing signs of having contracted a sickness by any chance? The king is in perfect health, the overseer says. Thanks for asking. What about the situation regarding the newest addition to the king's entourage? Kate says, how is Aiden getting along with the royal guards? The overseer makes a short pause before he answers Kate's question. Most of the royal guards do not accept Aiden as the figure of authority and then view him as a threat, the overseer says. Aiden seems to be aware of this, and he is constantly trying to provoke them in order to see their reactions. That does sound like Aiden, Melinda says. Is there any way in which we rebels could benefit from this friction between the royal guards and the creator? Brainan says, perhaps the constant tension between them is causing a blind spot of some sort that could be exploited by us when invading the castle. As has been previously stated, that there have been no changes recently that could affect the security of the palace. What about the king? Layla writes. You keep mentioning the security of the palace, but never that of the king. Is the king in a more vulnerable position now than he was before? The overseer does not answer Layla, and he simply hovers in the air in complete silence. I don't think he can read your writing, Layla. I say, hey overseer. Layla asked if the King of Olander is in a more vulnerable position now than he was before. Affirmative. The overseer says, the king is indeed in a more vulnerable position than before as a result of Aiden's arrival in the city. How so? Brennan says. King Unreal used to spend most of his days in the palace until recently, the overseer says, but ever since Aiden made his appearance, His Royal Highness has begun visiting many important facilities from Olander in order to personally inspect them and make sure that everything is in order. The king is afraid that Aiden might leave again if he finds the smallest imperfection within his cities, so he is constantly going out of his way to ensure that everything is running as smoothly as possible. This puts him in a position of vulnerability, as it is more difficult for the royal guards to defend him while he's on the move than when he was sitting on his throne inside the palace. As long as you know the king's schedule and the routes he is planning to take in advance, the possibility of succeeding in assassination attempt increases considerably. And could you provide us with this schedule of his? Brennan says negative. The overseer says that information is classified. Classified, huh? Brennan says, well, is there any sort of unclassified information regarding the king's schedule or his routes that you could disclose to us, or any information whatsoever that could be useful to us when organizing an assassination while we are moving from one place to another? The king likes to send scouts in advance to check the routes or potential traps, the overseer says. If you could identify who these scouts are, and you could easily figure out which route King Unreal is planning to take next. The scouts are typically sent one day in advance, and then they are sent again a few hours before the actual trip to see if anything has changed in the meantime. Knowing this information, you should be able to make reasonable, accurate predictions of when the king and his guards should be leaving the palace. Another strategy that could be used is to simply wait for the king to visit one of the facilities and try to ambush him on his way back. But that is not advisable because the king's inspections are usually very short, and there would be no time to set up proper traps, and that wouldn't immediately be neutralized by the royal guard. Hey now, that's quite the useful information you gave us there, overseers. Many thanks. Happy to be of assistance, Brennan. The overseer says, would the group named Cutthroat Dave like to ask me a question as well? Yes, can you stop calling us Cutthroat Dave? Why did you interrupt your conversation with Aiden all of a sudden earlier? Yeah, overseer already knows about the devices anyway, so we should probably go with that. Why did you interrupt your conversation with Aiden all of a sudden earlier today? The Overseer Protocol does not recall having interrupted any conversation with Aiden today. Overseer says, could you please be more specific? You know what conversation I'm talking about, I say. It's the one where Aiden kept questioning you about your true motives right at the end. He didn't ask you what you were truly after, and then you cut him off by giving him an automated response. Why did you stop the discussion there? Question unclear, Overseer says. Unfortunately, the Overseer Protocol cannot provide you with the correct question if the question is too vague. Please rephrase your previous query.